Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 8 of the anime series, Noragami Aragoto. And this was a highly intriguing, very fascinating episode. And I think the things I took away from it the most were the characterizations between Yato, Yukine, and, of course, Hiyori. Hiyori is very much finally coming back around to that understanding that with her sort of forgetting Yato, there is a danger of them being split apart in a sense, and her compassion for him, for both he and Yukine, being there for Yukine, trying to teach Yukine, all these kinds of things, you know, she doesn't want to let go readily of that. And there's a fear with him disappearing through the course of this episode for like a month. There is that legitimized fear that this could be something that actually happens. And she's confronting this with one of her own friends who had an encounter with Yato, you know, in the past. And now she's really becoming aware of that essence that the longer they are apart. This is why Yato is constantly texting her, constantly calling her, you know, leaving signs everywhere, trying to go everywhere with her, making a big production of her going to school. He doesn't want to lose her much as she doesn't want to lose contact with him. And the fact that she has built this small shrine, I mean, all the blessings that now come to the fore for him, they can go into that sort of, you know, heavenly realm. They can live there. You know, they can visit any time they want. Yukine actually goes and talks to Bishamon and, you know, wants to thank her for everything that's happened. But most notably, you know, Kazuma, he wants Kazuma to teach him about invocations and all this kind of stuff. And he's actually beginning to be trained by Kazuma in this episode. Again, just putting Yukine's now newfound respect for his position as exemplar, you know, as the chief and really sole sort of regalia for Yato, even though there is still Nora and everything like that. I mean, I love the growth in Yukine that this represents. It's a whole 180-degree turn, as I've talked about before, from where we saw him, especially in season 1, and how this season begins. He now respects his place, and he knows how he can positively affect Yato, but there's even that little bit of doubt on his part when they're looking for him, and Hiyori's like asking, where is he? Why is he not around? You know, Daikoku, Kafuku, they have no idea where the hell he is. He's off with Nora at that point and everything, and there's even that point when Yuki's on persona like, well, he's probably off with Nora, you know. It's hurtful, this dynamic, this, you know, sort of ageless dynamic that Yato keeps being drawn back into. It's kind of like the Godfather thing. I try to get out, but you keep pulling me back in. And it's insane that Nora is, you know, I'm still not entirely 100%, you know, comprehending the dynamic between she and Yato. There's obviously much more going on than just God and regalia, and we see in this episode how he has managed to exist before Hiyori ever came into the picture. And it's because he's the god of calamity. He's living up to that. He's sort of brainwashed. I mean, he's almost unaware of the passage of time, unaware of his surroundings. He is, for all intents and purposes, attacked by these phantoms who are masked as an extension, seemingly what this Ebisu character has been doing. Not necessarily, you know, in direct relation, but seemingly similar, if not entirely directly connected. Using these phantoms and, you know, masking them, giving them names, being able to manipulate them and control them to your own devices. And these wolf phantoms and this giant, like, goldfish phantom at one point, when Yato has gone to Nora and said, look, I want to break ties with you once and for all. I don't need this anymore. I don't need this to supplant my existence anymore. She will not have it. She's obsessed. She's consumed with commanding him and lording over him, or having that mind control. I mean, calling back to the flashbacks during the Bishamon arc where, you know, you had Kazuma going to him. There's very much this idea that he's kind of being led by the influence of Nora, in a similar fashion to how Yukine wants to impress upon Yato a more positive veneer. Nora is very much the negative. you know. And it's just insane to me. I mean, from killing a criminal in a prison cell because, the woman whose daughter, unfortunately, sadly, whose life was taken by this person, but to get a sort of sense of vengeance and closure, and Yato acts on it through Nora's influence. And he's also chasing down other criminals. There are people in this world, as they, lead us to believe, that are aware of who Yato is. There are enough, a minority of people enough to support his existence, at the very least, through this God of Calamity framework that Nora is exploiting to the fullest extent, of having him take down criminals, take the lives of perceived criminals, and he can't stand it. He doesn't want to be this. He doesn't want this anymore for himself. In contrast, and also sort of a parallel dynamic to Bishamon, are we seeing an evolution in the Yato God? He's no longer wanting to conform to that God of Calamity framework. He sees the bigger picture, whether through Hiyori's influence or the mutual influences of Shi and Yukine, as well as just everyone that they've encountered. He has a broader awareness, and it's almost like ramping up, angling up to where this should be nothing but benevolent for Yato. He's got his place in this heavenly realm. He can attend these, the same kind of meetings we saw Bishamon in the last episode attending amongst the higher gods and everything like that. He has a place in this realm. He's finally achieved it. It may be on a very infinitesimal scale as compared to the rest of the gods of this pantheon, but he's there. And then in walks Nora, and she threatens to undo and unravel all of it. Just as he's getting the barest perception of a taste of it, is it all threatening to be, brought back away from him again. And he kind of snaps out of it when he realizes, these flowers have bloomed. How much time have I been here? I've been completely unaware because of this influence of these phantoms, of Nora, all this stuff. The things I've been doing. I don't want to live this life anymore. I need to get back to Hiyori. And it's such a visceral, emotional, tumultuous ending for this episode, for him to realize that. And he still kind of has the chains clamped around his arms because Nora is referring to this father figure. Like, I don't know if she's referring to it as her father, if she's referring to it as their mutual father. Are they like siblings or whatever it is? I don't quite understand that dynamic. That's what I'm talking about between Nora and Yato. It seems to be more than just God and regalia, but what is it? I need it more clearly defined to understand it. But whatever the case may be, it's a negative, penultimately ominous influence on Yato. And it threatens to unravel all of the things he has wanted to achieve. Going back to that flashback, maybe it very much is a father figure who told him he doesn't need to have a shrine of his own. He's sort of worthless in the eyes of this parentage figure, whatever that amounts to be, a higher god, some other being that we have yet to encounter. Maybe it's somebody we have encountered and they're waiting and staving off the reveal of who this personage is in this dynamic. But I mean, the characterization in this episode for Hiyori to be brought to that precipice of now understanding the threat that she could lose any familiarity, any memory of Yato and Yukine, and she doesn't want to let go of that. Yet, is there still the perceptive risk of her own well-being, her own life? Tenjin reminds her of this. Don't spend too much time with us. Spend more time with your friends, with your family, your scholastic homework, all this kind of stuff. Pay mind to that. Because in the long run, that's, at least in this living world, that's what's more important. Worry about us when your time has come to an end. Hopefully, decades from now. Be mindful of where you're setting, the most influence for yourself. What you're setting most of your, focus on. And Yukine, like I say, he wants very much to stand up to now the expectations of his position, but he's still in conflict over this aspect of Yato that is still drawn to Nora. He has no idea. There is no communication between them for Yato to explain, I'm going to cut off ties. He just disappears. That was his impetus. He was going to try to remove himself from any more ties, any lingering holdovers to Nora and her whole framework, that God of Calamity framework. But he succumbed to the attack, and he was lured in, and Yukine is left with this sense of, am I not good enough? There's forever going to be that doubt. And of course, you have at the risk, at the center of that, what effect will this have on Yato in the long term? Will it be another blighting all over again? That kind of thing. Will he be corrupted? It remains unanswered. And by the end, of course, there's also been this idea of Ebisu, as we see, he succumbs to a blighting of sorts in his trying to tamp down all of these different phantoms. Sometimes they're incompatible, as he says, and it's having a negative effect on him. He says each of them will have this effect on him eventually, but there's only so long that he can actually effectively control them and manipulate them to nefarious purposes, probably. And, you already see in the OP, it looks like there's a pretty heated battle that is exchanged between Yato and Ebisu yet to come. So obviously, whatever machinations his hands are influencing are having an effect on Yato, if not directly, indirectly. So they will be brought together. And there is, I forget what the terminology is, but there's something, Ebisu is, visited by someone whom we don't see, who talks about fighting a particular artifact that I'm wondering what this has to do with. I mean, I'm wondering what Ebisu's whole game is, effectively. We knew what Kugaha's was. We saw this unfolding expertly. It all backfired, but every step of Kugaha's plan that was revealed, episode by episode, was that much more compelling and that much more, on edge. And so I'm wondering what exactly it is, what the driving force behind this Ebisu character is. And, we basically have that God of Fortune calling him Baldy again. I guess it's meant to be like sort of a jibe or something like that. Calling Ebisu Baldy, that's what really dictated my confusion as to whether that was actually Ebisu or not. And of course I had somebody, thank you very much for giving me the heads up in the comments of the previous episode that yes, in fact, this was Ebisu. The Baldy thing was just kind of a misunderstanding or misinterpretation or whatever it is, sort of, inadvertent misdirection in any case. But I'm definitely really on edge to see where this is going to go next and how this is going to play out for Yato, Yukine, and Hiyori, whether their separation is something that is now cast to the fates, that it's only a matter of time before it happens, and what effect that will have on the trio if that does take effect. And the most compelling of all, like I say, is that revelation that Yato has been able to remain perpetual through living up to this God of Calamity name, this designation, and that it's been a negative influence on Nora's part that has kept this perpetual, even though now he has finally evolved to a place, much as Bishamon herself had done, a more benevolent, beneficial place where the broader horizon is speaking to him. I don't need to supplant myself and keep myself, subsisting through destruction. I can actually exist for a more beneficial and benevolent reasoning. And how that conflicts, with Nora, with whomever this father figure is, probably with this Ebisu character, it all remains to be seen, and I am just stoked to figure it all out. See these pieces all come together and figure out what exactly is all going on with it. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 8 of Noragami Aragoto, if you've seen it, if you enjoyed it as much as I did, if you were as compelled by the characterizations and the revelations that were unfolding in this episode, if you're as stoked and penultimately curious to understand what Ebisu's machinations are and how this is all going to affect this main trio by the end. And otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.